Seraphina came from a broke-ass country that sent her on a conquest to invade and conquer the East and feed their starving country. However, she was defeated in battle and captured as a war prisoner by a savage barbarian who had planned to make her his bride and crack no matter the cost. A war took place on a barren wasteland between the Knights of Ildoran and the Barbarians. The Barbarians slaughtered the Knights as if they were nothing, tanking rifle bullets and devastating their forces. The volunteer troops were wiped out immediately, causing the front line to collapse. Just as Seraphina gave the order to retreat, 4 barbarians rushed her, but she pushed them back. Suddenly, a Goliath entered the battlefield, slicing through everyone just to reach Seraphina. Veor greeted the woman commander and demanded she face him in battle. If Seraphina backed down, their retreat would be impossible. She dove in for the first strike, but it was instantly deflected, and she was blown back. Veor pushed forward, forcing her back like a maddened beast. Suddenly, her sword began glowing and they clashed for the final blow, but her blade shattered and she lost. Seraphina dropped to her knees after her helmet shattered. While Veor prepared to riz her down, he commended her for taking so many blows, but Seraphina requested that he kill her. He refused, saying he wanted to take her as a bride and blow out her back, while Seraphina looked at him with disgust. When Seraphina woke up, she found herself in a prison cell. She realized she was chained up and remembered she was taken as a war prisoner by mere barbarians. She wondered what they planned to do with her, then remembered Veor's words and was horrified. Seraphina thought of her soldiers and wondered if they were able to organize a withdrawal. Then she thought about her starving country suffering from famine, making her heart break. Suddenly, Circe entered and claimed to be Veor's side piece. Seraphina demanded to know if they were going to torture her, but Circe said her only job was making sure his trophy was suitable for clapping. Circe pinned her restraints above her head and stated it would be harder if she struggled. After washing her down, Circe wiped away the blood and filth. She heard Seraphina exchange blows with her master and expected her to be more of a brute, but she had quite the feminine figure. She pulled out a dagger and claimed Seraphina would never leave this place. Circe walked toward her with torture equipment, but instead released her bonds, trimmed her nails, and got her dressed. Seraphina was shocked since she expected to be tortured for information. Instead, Circe prepared her for major clappage.
Yeah, boy.
Seraphina smelled scented oils on her skin and wondered when they started glazing up prisoners. She questioned her sanity and wondered what they were preparing her for. She thought it was some kind of sick, sacrificial ritual for barbarians. Then Circe stood up and said she now looked like a presentable baddie. Seraphina heard a roar and thought it was thunder. Suddenly, Veor entered and formally introduced himself as Thunder Voice Veor. Looking him in the eyes, Seraphina realized he was a monster. Her grandfather had told her stories of barbarians cutting the hearts out of women and eating them. Seraphina boldly declared she wouldn't beg for mercy and allowed them to do as they pleased, but Circe and Veor were confused. Veor called her Sarah and asked what the f*** she was talking about. He explained he brought her here to be married. That sent chills down her spine. Sarah demanded to know by whom, and he said it would obviously be him. They were enemies, but he was still willing to crack. Their values were different from the West. His tribe had taken female knights as brides for generations and cracked many fine shits from battle, and he had no plans on missing out.
Hold up. Let him
She thought it was madness. Veor reminded her that she already gave them permission to do as they pleased. He praised her sword skills again and explained he wasn't making her his bride for nothing. When they crossed swords, Veor felt overwhelming power in her thrusts, and it was enough to make him start simping. Veor assured her no harm would come to her and he wouldn't forcibly spread them. After he left, she was at a loss for words. 7 years earlier, Sarah was informed by her brother, Margrave Sidious, that she would lead the 17th Eastern Expedition. The country was devastated by famine and filled with peasants. Men looking at the war posters bowed as Seraphina rode past in her carriage. Sarah attended a gathering where nobles complained about food quality, but refused to stop profiting from wars. Sarah stepped out and was approached by 3 disgusting hags who asked her to chat. They asked how she felt about the Eastern Expedition, and if it was true, there were only undiscovered vile creatures there. They continued bashing the expedition, but Seraphina stood up and declared it was an honor to be sent into battle for her country. They asked what the point of sending a woman was. She said there was no greater happiness than marrying a rich gigachad and making sandwiches. Sarah was speechless at their ignorance and walked away. Passing by the peasants, she thought those wenches had it easy and were somewhat right. But the people of her country were starving, and the nobles refused to help them, so she had to conquer the eastern lands. Suddenly, Sarah heard a man screaming. A bum attempted to strike another down with a sickle, but she stopped him. They noticed she was a noble and, with no other choice, charged at her. She took them all down instantly. She asked why they would do this if they were so pathetic, but they were starving, and it was better than wasting away. Sarah took pity on them, removed her necklace, and offered it if they promised to never do bum activities again. The boys apologized, accepted it, and walked away. away. What happened that night strengthened her commitment to the Eastern expedition. On the day of her departure, she said a prayer to Princess Wistarizia, a princess who was stolen away from battle to be rizzed up as well. Her brother appeared before her, demanding she get married and start clapping for the family. Sarah was confused and said she was about to leave for war. Suddenly, he transformed into Veor, demanding she become his bride. Moments later, Sarah woke up next to a super Giga Chad with a legendary golden Excalibur shining with extravagant power that she had only dreamt of wielding.
That's disgusting.
Veor woke up and asked why she was screaming. Sarah demanded to know what was going on. When she thought about what could have possibly taken place, Sarah pulled out her sword and requested that he execute her immediately, but Veor asked why she would want that. Suddenly, Cersei came in and thought she was lucky to be alive. After Veor had gotten back the day before, Sarah overdosed on the paralytic poison she was given to be transported there. Veor apologized since it was administered in the dosage his people normally took, so she was brought to his room to rest. Sarah asked if anything diabolical happened, and he reassured her that nothing did. Veor laughed it off and told her to come have breakfast once she was done crashing out. Sarah got up and walked to the other room. She expected the breakfast to be utter garbage since she was a war prisoner. Sarah walked into an all-you-can-eat Brazilian steakhouse. Given the combined net worth of her country being 2 bronze coins, the peasants of her homeland could only dream of such a feast, causing her to drool from excitement. Veor wasn't sure how much a strong woman from the West needed, so he offered her a quarter of the entire thing. Sarah saw the 7-pound steak they served her and wondered what type of cheap trickery this was. She thought they were splurging such luxury in her face to shatter her pride as a knight in hopes of taming her. Sarah announced she would rather starve than dine with them, but suddenly her stomach started growling. Cersei walked over and whispered in her ear that Veor wouldn't admit it, but he went hunting by himself so they could welcome her with a feast. In the West, he would be considered royalty, so refusing his hospitality would be disrespectful. Sarah, as a proud noble, finally gave in and sliced off a piece of meat from the steak. When she saw how tender it was, she took a bite and tasted heaven for the first time in her life. Sarah started tearing up and didn't even think royalty in her country could eat like this. She asked what type of monstrosity the steak came from, and Veor said she could see it from the window behind him. She thought about domesticating this animal to feed her country, but when she looked, it was Veldora's grandchild. He said there were no shortages of them around there. When Sarah stepped outside, she was astonished to see a luscious green forest and a lake. Veor asked what was wrong, and Sarah answered that she expected them to be living on welfare checks. The battlefield they fought on was the wasteland between the west and east, but life in this area had always been strong. They walked around, and she saw many animals, including another dragon. They arrived at a waterfall, making Sarah think of her poor-ass homeland. Veor demanded that she take off her dirty rags so they could begin bathing, but she refused. Sarah wanted to know why the bathrooms were mixed, but that was simply how it was done there. There weren't any bathhouses, so they all bathed in nature. Veor explained that when in foreign lands, you do as the foreigners do. Cersei mentioned she started to smell like a dog, and that scrubbing her down the night before did nothing. Veor went to another spring because she was making a fuss about clapping together, so Cersei stayed to watch over her, in case a monster suddenly appeared and ate her. They were pretty docile if they were found near the settlement, like the Sowai-Wows. Sarah looked around and was horrified at the abominations casually walking around, then got up and ran away. She took off without grabbing her clothes, then suddenly heard a voice. The thought of getting caught by another barbarian was embarrassing and horrifying. When he approached, it was a handsome Chad that she'd for sure crack. She realized how good the man looked and got rizzed up in the process. Sarah was impressed since the peasants of her homeland were all scrawny and on death's doorstep. She then demanded he stop staring. From her distressed state, the man realized she was startled by the monsters. He mentioned his mother was a lady knight from the west on the Eastern expedition 20 years ago. When he was young, his mother told him there was less nature and fewer animals where she was from. All of a sudden, Sarah sneezed, and the man threw his dirty rags over her and smiled. He asked her not to catch a cold and offered his coat until they returned to her clothes. She wondered what a man, who could be a Western knight, was doing among the barbarians. Sarah sighed from exhaustion. Then the man placed his hand over her forehead and checked if she had a fever. He realized she wouldn't be able to make it down the mountain, then swooped her off her feet. Suddenly, Cersei appeared and called him Veor. Sarah realized he had shaved and that he was the same man who captured her. Veor thought all it took was a simple shave and the heavenly floodgates would overflow, but she slapped him for talking crazy. When they descended the mountain, Sarah blamed them for taking her into a den of monsters, but Cersei explained all the monsters around the settlement weren't hostile like the one they ate in the morning. As Sarah walked back, she realized Veor looked handsome without his disgusting caveman beard. However, days later, it grew back in full and he was a bum again. Vior informed Sarah that he invited the leaders of every tribe to introduce her. The gathering would be held in Lakeside Village, the largest settlement overseen by the Great Chief. Sarah asked if he should really reveal military secrets in case she escaped and was rescued by her knights. Vior started clowning her as if that would ever happen. Sarah wondered what was so funny, and he asked if she wasn't enchanted by his shaved face and legendary golden Excalibur proposal. However, his bold comment just made her more frustrated. Vior thought it was adorable that all it took to riz her was a shaved face and a marriage comment. He declared he intended to make her fall in love and allow him to crack. While he teased her, Cersei thought they sounded like a loving couple. When Vior introduced her to the fellow peasants, they each requested to battle the Crystal Helmet warrior first, thirsting for blood. Sarah assumed they wanted revenge for the barbarians she slaughtered on the battlefield. However, Vior told her to calm down. With his unlimited aura, he welcomed the powerful Crystal Helmet warrior and announced she was there to break bread and partake in the clapping festivities. The slaves immediately obeyed their master, causing their bloodlust to disappear. Sarah was shocked and asked what the was going on. Vior explained they only wanted to welcome her and spar with her. She wondered if any of them actually wanted revenge, but Vior was just as confused and asked his fellow warriors if any wanted to take her head. They all saluted like good boys and declared they didn't. She assumed they only obeyed because he was the Great Chief's son. Suddenly, a filthy peasant stepped forward and praised her strength. They believed she was a true warrior, since exchanging blows with their Great Chief was unheard of. They then tried to riz her and wished she had been their personal baddie instead of the master's. As Sarah walked through town, she realized the peasants had more food and resources than her own filthy country. They approached a house, and Vior called out that Thunder Voice Vior was present. The peasants crawled out, and he requested they share their hot water with the two filthy women beside him. The blonde woman was to be his wife, and the woman warmly welcomed them. The woman inspected the merchandise they brought, and thought Master Thunder Voice would surely be satisfied.
Nice.
Vior walked away as she dragged Sarah inside. Once inside, Sarah noticed how healthy the young ones were and thought they would make fine warriors. When she tasted their tea, she was amazed by its distinct flavor. Cersei asked if a slobby noble like her could truly appreciate such a rustic taste. Sarah asked if their husbands were the warriors she met outside, but both had died some time ago. One died last year in the war against the West, while their son was still a baby. She realized their deaths were caused by her army during their expedition. They believed it was necessary to secure resources for their country. She thought there was no reason to sympathize with filthy barbarians, but she didn't feel that way at all. Sarah couldn't apologize for the lives lost during her army's expedition. She had been captured, held captive, and offered her life to them, yet they had no intention of taking it. Sarah demanded to know why, since she may have been responsible for their husbands' deaths. The woman thought it was sad the boy wouldn't grow up with his father, but he was able to lay beside him as he passed away. She believed she was lucky enough to still have him. However, she found it funny that whether it was dragon hunting or monster hunting, the men always ended up dying. Sarah was speechless. Between the men before and the women now, she realized the barbarians viewed life and death completely differently from them. Suddenly, a watchguard blew a dragon whistle. Cersei announced they were under attack, and a monstrosity burst through the ceiling. Cersei found it strange since dragons usually didn't target villages. The child started crying, causing the dragon to target him. Cersei told Sarah to run, but she refused. Sarah kicked up an iron rod and smashed it into the dragon's face. Cersei thought it was impossible, then criticized her for fighting a monster with fire tongs. She believed the dragon obviously couldn't compare to that bearded oaf's Excalibur. She blocked several more attacks before jumping up and stabbing it in the eye. She instructs Cersei to run with the girls and to go get help while she fended off. Meanwhile, Vior and his savages slaughtered the other invading dragons throughout the village. Cersei arrived and informed him of the situation, causing him to flash step away like Minato for his main piece. Sarah blocked another strike, but the fire tongs snapped in half. She dropped her weapon and thought about her life as a proud knight, ready to die. However, Vior rushed in and screamed for her to cover her ears. He pulled her back, unleashed his thunder voice roar, and obliterated the overgrown poultry instantly. Vior removed his Batman helmet and thanked Sarah as the next great chief for protecting Cersei and the villagers. But more than anything, he was relieved she was okay. When she heard those words, Sarah started crying as her water faucet exploded once again. Later that night, Sarah got wasted thinking about how embarrassing it was to have a man protect her. Cersei said she was a lot more likable than before and was surprised a noble was willing to risk her life for peasants. Sarah thought about Vior and got flustered when a trio of fairies suddenly became captivated by Ildoran's blonde hair. Sarah spat in their faces. Thinking she was just hallucinating from being drunk, she looked again. They were clowning her. She demanded to know what these little monsters were, but Veor approached and introduced her to the chiefs of the other clans. Upon hearing she took on a dragon, they realized why Veor wanted to crack and held a party for her bravery. However, Sarah was disgusted. They thought finding a wife while he was so young was worth celebrating, leaving her speechless. The struggling alcoholic presented a wedding gift, making her wonder why he was giving her something so expensive. Veor suggested taking a look before declining. When she unsheathed it, she thought it was a masterpiece. It was enchanted and gave off a faint glow. He explained it was made with true silver alloy, what the West called mithril. In those same fairy tales, they referred to them as dwarves. Veor formally introduced everyone: the chief of the fairies, Viufumek, Karkaroth of the elves, Nimhala, the bud of the sacred tree, and the three wise elders, Vas, Guas, and Balhath. Sarah was speechless and didn't think she'd see more fantasy characters after the dragon. Veor explained they weren't just fantasy characters, but their loving neighbors. She couldn't deny their existence, but unlike the dragon, speaking with them gave her a gunshot wound to the head. She was surprised since she led the Eastern expedition for 7 years. However, they purposely avoided the West. They appeared because Veor arranged for her to be introduced to everyone. The tribes they represented shared a united culture under the Great Spirits and formed the Great Tribal Alliance. But unless there was a crisis, they were just drinking buddies. Sarah thought they were just alcoholics gathering instead of an alliance. She asked about the Ildoran Eastern expedition, but they paused and started clowning her. Veor explained they didn't get involved in territorial disputes. After all, humans were like animals. The alliance wasn't created to oppress peasants. She asked if they gathered because of the dragon threat. However, each tribe was more than capable of killing mere beasts. What they feared was a creature called fiends. They were living disasters. Compared to fighting them, Veor would gladly die at the hands of an Ildoran from the west. Moments later, Nimhala offered Sarah a toast. Veor explained it was a vitality-boosting drink made by the tree folk. The elder dwarves thought they'd see baby Veor soon and believed she had strong buns capable of producing a strong stock. She demanded they stop teasing, but Veor explained it was their way of giving their blessing. They all brought gifts too. Her dress was made by the fairies. Her golden necklace was created by the dwarves, and the elves enchanted her sword. It could repair itself, but she didn't think that was possible. Veor explained it was sorcery. They all compensated for what each other lacked. His tribe, the Cornem, offered their combat strength in exchange for goods and technology they didn't have. She looked around and realized this place was truly blessed. The following morning, Cersei popped up, but Sarah jumped and headbutted her. After looking over her new sword, Veor approached with a fresh cut. His hair grew back quickly, so he usually didn't bother shaving, but he knew he'd get the same reaction as before. Suddenly, Cersei stuffed a foot-long sandwich into her mouth and told her to eat. She asked what the thick, hot, and juicy meat was. Cersei said it was meat from the Tsukubaikeshi she slayed, but Sarah had already downed the meat stick. She grabbed another and started nibbling. Veor mentioned an old acquaintance of hers was in town and wanted to meet. While walking, Sarah wondered who it could be. Upon arriving, they met a pregnant, one-eyed baddie. She greeted Lady Seraphina and was impressed she defended a peasant family from a dragon. Hearing stories of her bravery made her nostalgic. However, Sarah had no idea who she was. She revealed herself as Nylaya, a knight who served under her during the Eastern expedition 4 years ago. Sarah remembered when they were surrounded by barbarians and Nylaya was defeated in battle. She couldn't believe it and thought she was long dead. Apparently, she was pregnant with her second baby. Inside, Nylaya explained her husband informed her about the Crystal Helmet Warrior, and she knew it was her. Nylaya revealed the man who defeated her, proposed, and got to crack. She had trouble believing she was at peace. Her time during the expedition felt like another person's life. Sarah asked why she called out to Veor when they arrived. He was a man of authority, and she thought it was rude. However, Nylaya explained it wasn't the same as in the West. Nylaya was his cousin's wife, so they were distant relatives. Sarah claimed he wasn't young at all, but Cersei revealed he was only 18. When Sarah was shocked, Nylaya exposed her for being 26, but said that was splendid since she'd be more experienced in cracking and clapping. Suddenly, Sarah declared she had no intentions of being his wife. Veer burst out laughing, then addressed her full name and apologized for his unintended insult to a fellow warrior. Cersei was confused and wondered why he apologized. Nylaya asked if Sarah had any injuries when they fought, but she had none. She fought until her sword shattered. Nylaya concluded Veor was in the wrong. Warriors in battle fight to the death without mercy. When two foes are evenly matched, they fight until one gives out. Veor, whose blows can cut down dragons, fought until her ordinary steel weapon expired but was unable to land a single blow. In other words, he needed an equipment advantage to fight her evenly. If he left himself open for a moment, she would have won. When he apologized again, she blushed, and Nylaya confirmed she wanted her back blown out. Moments later, Vidal, Nylaya's husband, arrived with their son. Seeing Nylaya with her family, Sarah realized she had changed and looked happier than ever before. She thought it looked nice but accidentally said it out loud. Vidal suggested having another party for the newlyweds. Later that night, Sarah admitted to Veyor that she knew nothing about this place or its people. She marched and fought against them. They all had families back home just like her knights, but she never thought about it. She called them savages and barbarians, using that as justification to launch an invasion, believing it was right for her people. She was a knight and noble of Ildoran. She still wanted to save her barren homeland and suffering people. That was why she had no intention of becoming his wife. However, that was only how she felt as a knight, but as an individual, she wanted to crack. Days later, an ugly red-head priest named Malchus marched east with a group of knights, hoping to rescue the warrior princess. Even though they were exhausted, the nasty wench forced them onward. Sarah spent her mornings chopping firewood with her new sword. She thought living as a village girl was boring and needed some excitement. Circe realized she'd been stalking her the past few days because she was bored. She found that odd since Sarah was fascinated by daily chores. Sarah's time as a squire should have been spent learning them, but her grandfather abused his nobility and forced them onto a peasant child instead. Circe wasn't even surprised a noble abused their power so openly. However, she didn't think Sarah would have that problem today since the master was returning with a surprise. Moments later, Veyor arrived with a group of savages looking to spar with her. Circe didn't think he'd come up with such a meathead idea, but the meathead herself had no objections. Inside, Circe revealed they still had Sarah's armor stored away. Sarah was surprised. When Circe offered to help her suit up, she was shocked again, since most people needed training to assist a knight with armor. Once she was ready, Sarah stepped out, and the men cheered, hoping to face her in battle. Veyor handed her a wooden sword, so no one would die a tragic death. Her first challenger was the warrior Raham, who got his first taste of blood during their most recent conflict. Once Veyor gave the signal, Raham told her not to hold back and charged in, but she immediately crushed his glizzy and thought he was pitiful. His pathetic father, Gamelan, stepped up to avenge him, but she deflected his attack and snapped his glizzy too. She thought they both fought like wimps. Next up was two-necked Sero. He thanked her for saving his sister and niece when the dragon attacked the village the other day. He was grateful, but planned to show no mercy. Sero pulled two swords because he was scared of a girl. When he rushed in, Sarah blocked every strike before giving him an intense backshot to the chest. The rest of the men all proceeded to get stomped by the warrior princess. Circe didn't think she was that strong. Bufumek wasn't surprised by how much willpower she was using. It was the strength of one's desire to achieve something. From fish swimming, dragons flying, and fairies being free, it all came from willpower. Compared to the other races, the Cornem lived such short lives, with nowhere near enough time to accomplish what they wanted. That was why Cornem warriors possessed such powerful willpower. Techniques empowered by willpower could only be contested by willpower. It was pretty much hockey. Seconds later, their swords snapped, ending the match in a draw. Veyor asked if that relieved her boredom. It did, and she thanked him. Just as Vayufumek suggested busting out some booze, a villager came running to inform Veyor an injured Morisubiri was heading their way from the west. Veyor found it strange since no one around there would have let an injured dragon escape. Sarah didn't expect to see him so troubled. In the woods, they led one into a pitfall trap. After tying it down, Sarah leaped up and impaled it through the skull. It started thrashing and threw her off, but Veyor caught her in his arms. After slaying it, Veyor explained the Morisuberi, unlike the dragons before, was a true dragon. It had 6 legs. According to the elf sages, the middle pair used to be wings. Long ago, they flew using willpower. Gamelan called out after noticing a burn mark. Veyor saw there wasn't any soot, meaning ordinary flames didn't cause it. It reminded him of the Rijutsu used by the elves. It was a form of magic. Normally, burns like this required sulfur or volcanic stones as a catalyst, but if that were the case, there would have been far more charring. Veyor asked if Sarah knew anyone in the West capable of this kind of sorcery. He was certain no one in their lands would have done it. Sarah remembered the church could use the power of light to soothe the spirits of knights. Other than that, she wasn't aware they had any combat potential. Suddenly, Viufumek arrived and informed them a group of lunatics was using Rijutsu without a catalyst. Because of that, a blight would soon appear. Veyor ordered half the men to return to the village to prepare for the worst-case scenario and the other half to follow him into battle. Sarah asked what blights even were. He explained they formed when natural law became stagnant and turned into fiends. Meanwhile, Malchus and her knights were getting murked by the local dragon. She declared they'd come too far to retreat and opened her scripture. While they were running, a dragon came flying past after being blasted away. They looked over and spotted a lunatic wench. When Sarah approached, Malchus was overjoyed to see she was unharmed. Sarah explained she was the priest assigned to her first division of knights. Malchus demanded to know what the wretched barbarian was doing with her and declared he needed to die. Sarah told her to calm her aggression. However, Malchus argued they had been at war for over 700 years and asked how the La Vaillante princess could have forgotten that. She then demanded to know if those low-born creatures violated her, but Sarah denied the allegations. Outraged, she activated a spell and launched it toward a nearby tree. Vior called it an asinine mistake to forcibly extract power from the earth and trees. Malchus demanded Sarah return home with her. When Vior tried to speak, she told him to be silent before activating a stronger spell. Vior called her a fool and stepped in front of Sarah. However, while she laughed, Vior declared her pathetic projectiles had no effect on his willpower. If she wanted his head, he told her to pick up a blade and come take it. He pulled Sarah closer and rizzed her into submission, making her even more pissed. When she activated another spell, the area around them began to distort. She was draining the vitality of the land. Vior stepped forward to behead her and apologized to Sarah. However, a tentacle monster emerged and snatched her up for an anime scene. Sarah rushed in, but Vior stopped her, explaining the blight had manifested and it was now a fiend. The knights rushed in to help, but one was blown across the forest, while the other received a one-way ticket to hell. As the monster got her ready for major clappage, memories of her parents being hung by the church and her being taken away came flooding back. It had begun feasting on her soul. When Sarah asks him not to stop her, he offers his help instead. She was willing to risk her life for that wench, and they couldn't ignore that. Especially after she risked her life protecting the villagers, she'd earned that debt with her life, and they intended to pay it back in full. After she thanks them, Vior instructs the men to keep the tentacles occupied while he exposes its core with his thunder voice. Then Sarah was to cut it down. When they got into position, Vior unveiled his aura and revealed its core. Sarah sees the abomination, then charges in to cut it down. After it was defeated, Malchus landed on her skull and knocked them both out. Later, Malchus wakes up in a cell, just like Sarah did. Vior comes in, and she is horrified, saying she'll be violated, passed around, then murdered. She claims divine punishment will befall him. She suddenly remembers Lady Sarah and begs her to smite this savage down with the hammer of justice. When he steps aside, she is utterly embarrassed, realizing she must have behaved the same way upon her arrival. Vior reassures her she didn't have to compare herself to scum. Malchus sees their relationship and asks why they were so friendly when they were enemies. However, as Knight Commander of the 17th Eastern Expedition, Sarah declares the barbarians were no longer her enemy. Malchus couldn't comprehend what she was saying since the barbarians had sworn vengeance through their holy crusade. But Sarah explains they never hated the West, and she wasn't even sure why, so she's decided to stay a while and understand. Since Malchus couldn't remember, Sarah reminds her the warriors here saved her life. She wasn't asking her to understand, but repaying goodwill with evil goes against the teachings of the church. Malchus suddenly asks if she had fallen into depravity, shocking everyone present. Vior asks if she had an IQ of 7, but Sarah explains she had a tendency to put her on a pedestal. Malchus then criticizes her outfit and questions if she had been turned into a sex slave. She claims she was of royal succession, had been defiled, then wonders what Princess Wistaria would think. Vior suddenly asks if they truly thought Princess Wistaria was dead. He wasn't surprised since she had been missing for 20 years. Malchus tells him to watch his mouth, saying she was named a saint by the church after her death. He didn't care about any of that, but reveals she was very much still alive. She was his mother. When Vior leaves to fetch her, Sarah explains it has been 20 years since she disappeared. After Sarah's mother died, Wistaria became like both a sister and a mother to her. Suddenly, they felt the willpower of an elite knight approaching. Wistaria comes in and, as the wife of the great chief, welcomes Lady Serafina de la Villaine. After a menacing introduction, Wistaria embraces her into the juicy melons, saying she missed her so much and she had grown into a fine woman.
Yeah, boy.
Sarah had forgotten how bold the free-spirited princess was. Vior asks her to stop harassing Sarah, but Rezia asks if he has gotten to crack yet. When he pathetically says he's courting her, she clowns him and calls him a useless simp. Malchus asks if she was truly the former princess, but Rezia realizes she was part of the crackpot cult of liars and dismisses her presence. After clowning everyone except Circe, she announces glory awaits them on the beach. Apparently, hunting a true dragon was a rare accomplishment, as was slaying a fiend. At the beach, the tribe pays their respects to the beast, while the men carefully butcher all of its meat. In the West, such sites of mortality were kept in the shadows, but here, they honor the creature's death. She hadn't been there long, but couldn't help feeling grateful and excited to scarf down the meat stick, which she thought was delightful. Vior suggests trying one with sauce, and when she does, her floodgates open up. These creatures would have been hunted till extinction in the West. Rezia comes over and pours her a shot of quartz wine. It's brewed by the fairies of the wetlands, and there wasn't a finer liquor around. If she drinks that, she'll be gone. Sarah walks aside to down her meat stick and sacred booze in private. private. She looks into the shot with swirls in her eyes, takes it, and experiences heaven for the first time. Meanwhile, behind her, Malchus thought it was blasphemous. Circe asks if she was hungry, but she calls it treacherous meat. When her stomach begs for help, Circe calls her pitiful, then stuffs the meat saber into her mouth. Circe says she's fortunate Lady Sarah and the warriors were able to save her. After a few bites, she starts crying, realizing she led the knights to early graves because she insisted on saving Sarah. She was convinced it would be easy, but she was the only survivor. Circe calls her foolish. The men joined her because they chose to. She should be relieved she survived. Moments later, Rhesia joins Sarah for a drink. Sarah thought finding out she was alive was the greatest joy of her life. Rhesia thought she was fitting in well, and the engagement necklace looked good on her. Sarah was shocked and thought it was supposed to be a ring. However, Rhesia explains you'll lose a ring if your arm gets bitten off by a dragon here. Rhesia then asks how she truly felt, saying no one would hold it against her. Sarah brings up her obligation to the people of the Lavalent lands and the country. However, Rhesia points out she'd been fighting for others for so long, it was conceited to think she knew what was best for others if she didn't even know what was best for herself. Sarah dreamed about a talking dragon that night, then woke up and accidentally blew out Viewfumek's back in the process. When Malchus saw the members of the other tribes, Viewfumek landed on her head, and she demanded to know why she had to deal with barbarians and inhuman creatures. Circe explains the 5 tribes had gathered to perform a sacred cleansing. Malchus couldn't accept such vile creatures. However, Circe calls it ludicrous to think the only things that exist are the things she finds believable. She calls her stupid. Rhesia arrives with the others and informs Malchus she would be participating since she was the cause of the blight. Calca mentions she had already been cleansed, but it was important for her to witness the results of her actions firsthand. When she asks what he means, Vior asks if she remembers the name her parents gave her. Malchus was the surname she received from the church 7 years ago, but she couldn't remember what she was called at the orphanage. In fact, she couldn't remember anything before receiving her current name. Apparently, it was a side effect of the blight. They were surprised she was even alive. Circe thought it was a blessing, saying maybe she'd be a normal gal if she forgot the church. That pissed her off, causing her to get in Circe's face. She calls her a little wench and tries to strangle her. Rhesia eggs them on, causing Circe to put her into a UFC chokefold submission until she loses consciousness. After winning the featherweight world champion belt, Rhesia suggests taking them down to the river. While waiting for the freak to wake up, Circe reveals she was originally from Ildoran until 6 years ago. However, Sarah had already figured it out. Her obvious hatred for nobles and the fact she called her a knight instead of a warrior gave it away. Sarah asks if the memories of her homeland were something she'd rather forget. Circe admits she doesn't even remember them, so she couldn't be bothered since she had no intention of returning. On the way to the river, Malchus asks why she was running errands with the savage girl, but Circe informs her she smelled like a dog. Malchus was appalled by her audacity. However, Circe claims she smelled like a mixture of blood, sweat, and cheap perfume. She pinches her nose and asks when the last time she bathed was. Malchus thinks about it and admits it was when Sarah got captured by the barbarians over half a month ago. After bathing, Sarah snatches up some fish from the river for a midday snack, then turns around and smiles. Once they're cooked, they all take a bite together. On the way to the cleansing site, everyone was impressed. The new bride had taken down the blight. Veor clowns her for letting that wench bust her head open after the battle, but Sarah excuses herself by saying anyone would relax after slaying an abomination. Viewfumek says she was flying in circles when she passed out. Sarah apologizes, thinking she must have been exhausted. However, Veor explains fairies were natural phenomena and didn't have physical bodies. She even had trouble telling Malchus and Circe apart, but Viewfumek thought it didn't matter, as long as she knew who was important. They reached the site where they slayed the fiend, and it was a barren wasteland just like Sarah's homeland. Malchus slowly walked onto the devastation she caused and fell to her knees. Veor explains it was an after effect of the blight. Just as they all possessed willpower, nature did as well. When a living being is depleted of willpower, it simply never returns. But when nature's willpower stagnates, it grows corrupt and turns to dust. That was what Karka taught him several years ago. Sarah thought that was convincing for secondhand knowledge. Before explaining further, Karka asks for the tool of the fool who caused it. When he presents the Didi scripture, Malchus calls them thieves and runs over, but Circe quickly puts her in a headlock. Karka recognizes it as a simple Rijutsu text lacking artistry. However, it was still potent enough to drain this much willpower from the land and turn it to dust. Moments later, they bring in catalysts from each tribe and prepare the ritual site to help the land recall its true nature. Once everything was ready, the man with the most aura among the 5 tribes stepped forward. As Karka began the incantation, Sarah noticed it sounded older than any language she'd ever heard. It was a call for purification, passed down for countless centuries, a prayer to purify all wickedness in creation, a call for a great cleansing using all 4 elements. Veor roared, then drove his willpower-infused blade through the magic circle. Shockwaves rippled through the area, restoring life to the land before them. Veor looks to Sarah for her opinion, only to find her tearing up at the miracle before her. Afterward, they spent the afternoon replanting trees. The idea of a Lavalent noble planting trees was unheard of, but Sarah thought it was a pleasant experience. At the end of the day, Sarah tells Veor she's beginning to understand the relationship the people here have with nature, as well as what they're fighting for and trying to accomplish. The following day, Sarah spent the morning sparring with Razia. She was impressed by how much Sarah had improved, but suddenly picked up a second sword. They flew across the battlefield, trying to strike each other down. Razia jumped and dove down with extreme force, but Sarah blocked it. However, Razia tried to take off her head with willpower and barely missed. Razia struck again, but Sarah parried it, then turned and disarmed one of her swords. Razia commended her, but charged in and swiped sand into her eyes before giving her an intense backshot. Razia said she had become a fine knight. If she wasn't holding back out of admiration for her, she'd bet she was already stronger. Sarah asked if she thought so. Why did she cheat? However, Razia claimed if she was complaining about that, she'd be dead against a dragon. Hearing her words, Sarah was reminded of the time Razia pretended to be kidnapped, only to reveal herself and slaughter the entire camp of bandits. When Razia noticed dirt on the necklace, she reminded her to wash it off later. Sarah didn't think it came off since it didn't have a latch. Razia explained it came off with willpower and suggested touching it while wishing strongly for it to come off. When she did, it came off, and she was shocked it was also enchanted. After washing the dirt off, Sarah tried to put it back on, but it wasn't choking her. She returned to Razia and explained the situation. She even wished for it to choke her, but nothing worked. Razia smiled and explained there was a ritual. She needed to sneak up behind the person that gave it to her, douse them with water, then whisper, "Guess who?" into their ears. Sarah tried, but Razia told her to say it softer and sexier. She had to put some femininity into it, like a mature, experienced baddie. Sarah tried once more.
Hey, can you guess who?
But sounded like a dying duck. She suddenly realized she had to riz Veor to put it back on, and Razia asked if she could pull it off. Sarah hesitated at first, but declared she'd do it. However, Razia reminded her she needed to keep the necklace coming off a secret and avoid his sight. While Sarah prepared for her mission, Cersei asked Razia why she assigned such an asinine quest, since none of it was necessary. But Razia only said it'd be a nice setup ritual, not that it'd actually let her put it back on. She thought they'd never crack and make a mini-me if they didn't have a third-party assist. But truthfully, she just wanted to see her grandchild while she was still a baddie herself. While Veor visited the villagers, the boy pointed above him, and when Veor turned, Sarah dropped the bucket and doused him by accident. The woman thought it only rained on him, while Sarah made a quick escape. Afterwards, Veor visited his mother and asked if she'd seen Sarah. In response, she told him Sarah had stepped out, but requested he take a seat for a discussion. Then she outright asked if things were going well between him and Sarah. She began lecturing him about how to treat a woman, but Cersei thought it was rubbish. When he got up to look for her by the saplings, Razia suggested taking her somewhere quiet, so no one would hear him blowing out a noble's back.
It should have been me, not him!
Sometime later, Sarah came in to ask if Cersei knew where Veor was. She informed her he was visiting the saplings. While Malseus was doing slave work, Sarah declared she was heading to battle. At the sight of the ritual, Sarah got ready to drench him in dirty water, but he sensed her bloodlust. From the feeling of her willpower, he called out and asked what she was doing up there. Sarah claimed she couldn't be seen during the ritual, jumped down, and ran away like Naruto Uzumaki. She tried a more offensive approach next, but was caught, then facials a tree before running off. She tried to catch him while collecting herbs, but couldn't find an opening. After many L's, she wondered if he was some type of wild animal, but Malseus thought she was acting like a lunatic today. After shaving, Veor asked Cersei if Sarah was okay. It was like they were beefing, but whenever he tried to talk to her, she ran off. Cersei remembered Razia warning her to keep the ritual a secret, then sighed because she was surrounded by morons. However, Veor was worried he made the mistake of placing the engagement necklace on her without permission.
Lock him up! Solitary confinement!
He had intended on revealing what it represented, but his mother got to it first. He was afraid she'd reject him, putting it aside instead of addressing it. He wondered if she found him pitiful for it. Cersei didn't think that at all, since he was trying so hard. She told him not to worry and reassured him it was okay. Meanwhile, Sarah enlisted the help of the lowly wench. However, Malchus came to the conclusion she was fed up with the barbarians and wanted to make an escape. When she accepted the mission, Sarah began undressing and instructed her to put on her dress. Moments later, Veor spotted a sexy redhead and chased after her.
What do you mean by that?
Thinking she was his pretend girlfriend. He asked her to please wait, but when he caught up, he realized it was the slave they just hired for free. Suddenly, he was splashed with water, and Sarah lunged onto him. But she didn't realize he had a secret weapon. She should have expected it from the man who fought her to a standstill. However, she refused to lose and latched onto him, then whispered, "Guess who?" Veor recognized the voice, then the squishy marshmallows, and wondered if he was being tested. He whispered, "Serafina de la Villon," her full name. She immediately jumped off and tried to put the necklace back on, but tragically failed. When he asked for an explanation, she instantly snitched on Resia, claiming it was a ritual to put the necklace back on. He sighed and told her it was obviously nonsense. Back home, they confronted Resia, but she claimed she never said it'd actually be put back on. When Veor apologized for his mother, Resia suggested digging into the food Circe made, while Malchus ate alone. After they ate, Veor took Sarah outside for a private discussion. He asked to see the necklace, then explained that to put it back on, an oath must be recited. He wanted to give her the necklace properly and asked if she'd accept. She steamed up, stuttered, and said of course she'd accept. Once he said his vows, it started glowing and shaped into a necklace as he placed it around her neck. That was the prayer pact necessary to put the necklace on. Meanwhile, Circe asked what to do about the slave, and Resia suggested patting her on the head. The following day, Malchus asks why Sarah accepted the necklace if she intended on returning home one day. After Sarah says Resia tried convincing her to stay, Malchus questions the great chief's wife's sanity. Sarah hesitantly insists she'll never forget her duties as a noble. She tries to think about what happiness means to her, but comes up empty and begins crying. Malchus calls her pitiful. She finds it bizarre seeing La Villante the Frozen acting like a village peasant. Sarah thinks it's all a misunderstanding. Before coming here, all she ever thought about was duty and war, fulfilling the duty of a noble house blessed with talent for war. She was obsessed with those ideals and understands why others saw her as the ideal knight. She was the knight commander leading the 17th Eastern Expedition, but to the people of the East, she was nothing more than an invader from the West. She doesn't regret the last 7 years because she believed it was the right thing at the time. However, she never imagined the people here wouldn't hate her for it. Malchus asks if that guilt is enough to make her abandon her homeland. Sarah thinks about her country and everyone who died during the campaign, wondering if it was ever worth it. Moments later, Circe calls her out for feeling guilty while still wearing the engagement necklace, as Veor overhears the entire conversation. Later that night, they finally let Malchus join everyone for dinner. While eating, Sarah reflects on how rich and nourishing the land is. The dragons are ferocious, but a single hunt can feed the entire village. She realizes that even if they succeeded in conquering it, they still wouldn't be able to farm the land. Without cultivation, there's no room to settle or grow grain, but cultivating it would eventually destroy the land's natural bounty. For 700 years, they've tried claiming this land every few decades. Veor says she looks like Alvin and the Chipmunks and tells her to slow down. She starts gagging, but Malchus quickly hands her a drink. Veor asks if she's still thinking about what they discussed earlier. She admits she can no longer call their cause righteous, but wonders if admitting that would dishonor her fallen soldiers. Veor asks if they can talk in private after dinner. Outside, they admire the beauty of the 3 moons together. Sarah admits she no longer knows what to do. Part of her wants to return home, while another wants to pursue her own happiness. She's reached a crossroads. Veor suggests using her imagination. He believes doubts only lead to regret, so imagining each outcome might help her decide what she truly wants. She wanted to save her people, enough bounty to finally end the Eastern expeditions. But even if she succeeded, she'd likely face a horrible fate as a noble after being taken captive. She didn't want to go back at all. She imagines abandoning her duties and staying with Veor. Even though he was a bearded bum, he wasn't vulgar. He couldn't match her swordsmanship, but his size and strength made up for it. However, he was only 18. Given time, he'd eventually crack. She wonders if she'd find happiness popping a squat and having a mini Veor, deciding it wouldn't be so bad. After imagining both futures, she's still no closer to making a decision. Veor expected her to reject him outright, so he's happy she's still undecided. It's her choice to make, and all he can do is stand by her side. He suggests broadening her perspective by taking a trip. The following day, Margrave Sidious receives a report that Seraphina has gone missing on the battlefield. Afterward, he wonders if she realizes sacrificing herself still wouldn't be enough to save their people. Meanwhile, Veor asks if she's chosen a destination, and she decides on the dwarven settlement. He's impressed by their underground infrastructure, but even more interested in their hot springs. Sarah has no idea what those are. Realizing her country was full of peasants, he explains their natural hot baths. She thinks he's joking since only royalty could afford to heat that much water. But Veor explains the water is naturally heated from underground. She's appalled and calls it unfair. They had all the dragon meat in the world, but no hot water. Meanwhile, the dwarves had mithril and endless hot water. She couldn't believe how bloody rich this land was. Moments later, Sarah is shocked again when Veor reveals he asked a dwarf craftsman to make her a new helmet. She asks how she's supposed to pay, since she's a brokey out here in the boonies. Veor says it's no problem because the more Subari they hunted more than covered the cost. Apparently, Elder Balhath is even making it from mithril. Cersei and Malchus notice how happy she looks while Batman and Robin laugh. Sarah asks when they can leave, but Veor tells everyone to cover their ears before screaming for Viufumek. She suddenly appears asking for booze. Veor apologizes, but she says any request from Orkfeim takes top priority. He asks her to tell Elder Balhath he wants to know when his Amazon package is ready. After she vanishes, he asks if she's fallen in love and wants to crack yet, but she admits his royal blood makes it a possibility. Viufumek soon returns and says the package will be ready by tomorrow morning. The next morning, as they depart, Veor says they'll have to cross the distant mountain range. Sarah thinks it would take weeks on foot, but Veor sheds some blood. His aura glows as it transforms into an artificial dragon. After taking off, he immediately rizzes her, while Cersei says they already look like a married couple and she was too embarrassed to admit it. Moments later, they were attacked by a fireball, but it missed. It was a flame dragon, another true dragon. Unlike the Mor Subari, it wasn't injured, and if they took it on, the two of them might survive. But Cersei and Malchus would surely die. Their only choice was to flee. Veor thought it was odd since it usually wouldn't be interested in a mock dragon. It suddenly got right in their faces and ready to fireball, but the dwarves started shooting at it like O-block savages, distracting the beast long enough for them to land safely on the ground. Once they landed, the dwarves ordered a full retreat. They pulled Sarah along, but she froze in fear at the sight of the monster approaching. A dwarf threw a flashbang, blinding it long enough for them to escape into the mountain. Once it regained its sight, it shot a fireball into the tunnels, engulfing the two of them in flames. After the devastation, it approached with bloodlust, searching for its prey. When Sarah looked back, it suddenly took off and left. Once they got back up, Sarah asked if Veor was all right, but he was almost cooked well done. Malchus and the others came running to check on them as well. On the way in, Veor thanked them for their support. If it wasn't for them, the cult woman would have surely perished. Sarah asked if it was rare to encounter one of those. Apparently, they usually didn't leave their crater at the top of the mountain. Once they reached the center, Sarah and Malchus were terrified by the technology they were capable of. Sarah thought it was amazing and complimented their talent when she saw the furnace. The dwarf proudly explained there was nothing they loved more than digging and learning. Sarah apologized and introduced herself with her full name. He told her not to worry about being formal before introducing himself as Kimaki. Kimaki suggested showing them around, but the others grew jealous and claimed he'd just get lost. After exchanging names, Sarah thought it was a shame she still couldn't tell any of them apart. They arrived at a waterfall, where Kimaki introduced the source of their hot spring. The village peasants were astonished. It was currently boiling hot, but they cooled it down in a separate building. Before going in, Veor said they'd split off there, surprising Sarah. Cersei immediately asked if she was hoping to bathe together, but Sarah denied the Diddy allegations. Veor explained it was a dwarven tradition to have separate changing rooms, though he found it strange. Sarah thought him being surprised was even stranger. Inside, Cersei offered to help remove the armor, but Malchus wanted to as well. While they removed it together, Kimaki watched from the shadows. They noticed he was climaxing by himself and wondered what happened to separate rooms. They were disgusted. Sarah lectured him that even though he was a mini-me, he shouldn't watch people change. Kimaki immediately apologized and removed the helmet, revealing herself as a fellow female. They were shocked and couldn't believe it, so she showed them the mini rice patties as proof. However, she claimed to be 55 years old that year. Kimaki told them not to assume they were all thick with beards. Kimaki revealed she was only interested in the armor she wore. She admitted she didn't need payment for the hospitality and really just wanted to perform maintenance on Sarah's armor. They realized she wanted to crack the armor. The moment Sarah agreed, the men barged in and penny-pinched the armor away. They wanted to know what happened to separate rooms. Inside the hot springs, Kimaki explained the waters had been flowing for at least 2,000 years. Before stepping in, Malchus was having the time of her life scrubbing Sarah's back. When Sarah got in, she felt heaven on earth for the first time. The last time Circe came was with Recia. Apparently, she could use the mock dragon as well. You earned the right to use one by defeating a true dragon completely on your own. When Sarah heard that, she immediately wanted to prove herself to the spirit. She thought it sounded like a fantasy and wanted the same. Circe thought it was dangerous even for her. Kimaki believed humans loved living on the edge, even wanting to challenge a dragon single-handedly. Sarah suddenly noticed the starry night even though they were underground. However, Kimaki explained it was all mithril. It glowed because it was affected by the volcano's willpower. The boulder over there was true silver as well. If Sarah, a human warrior, channeled willpower through it, it'd light up. Sarah immediately went to try, but Circe tried to warn her that Diddy was lurking. When she touched it and channeled her willpower, it glowed, and she suddenly found herself gazing up at the stars. However, Veor called out and asked what she was doing there. She looked down, and his face was in sight of her sacred peach. Sarah demanded to know what he was trying to do. He explained the changing rooms were separate, but they funneled into the same baths. Malchus called him a savage, while Circe thought the only way they'd crack was if accidents like this happened. Kimaki didn't realize he was still a virgin. Sarah looked down and realized it was the biggest dragon she'd ever seen in her life. She asked why it was suddenly getting bigger. Malchus rushed over, claiming she'd defend her virtue at all cost. Afterward, Malchus almost died from stress, and Sarah felt she'd lost something irreplaceable. She asked where his armor was, but the dwarves had stolen it. At dinner, they were served potato mochi, disgusting, alcohol-infused snails, and Dungeness hot spring crabs. Sarah was excited for dwarven cuisine. The hot spring crabs lived in the hot springs, giving them a unique taste. Malchus was disgusted. Veor asked Sarah what dwarves like to drink in Western folklore. She instantly asked if they had dwarven fire wine. Kimaki smiled and pulled out a fifth of liquor. Sarah didn't think she'd ever smelled a finer liquor. After taking a sip, she wanted to catch some bodies on the battlefield. Veor said the crab legs went well with the booze, and she slurped the meat out of the shell. After swallowing, she thought it tasted amazing.
Yeah, boy.
While watching them feed each other, Circe thought the accident had a positive effect on them, causing Malchus to overdose from stress yet again. After dinner, they were led into the center of the settlement, where they found a massive monstrosity the village peasants considered too advanced. Sarah asked Veor if he felt no fear after seeing technology on this level. The thought of it being used for conflict terrified her. However, Veor saw no reason for concern since it wasn't in the dwarves' nature to desire conflict. They arrived at Balhath's lab and greeted him. Kimaki rushed over to hug her grandfather, explaining she'd run into them during Fire Dragon Patrol. Balhath was glad to see Sarah doing well and mentioned her armor was being inspected by the apprentices. It'd be good as new by morning. Sarah expressed her gratitude and couldn't thank them enough. Curious, she asked about the new helmet. Balhath presented the enchanted snow bunny. Veor thought it looked stylish, but Sarah was disappointed. However, Balhath told her to try it on. When she did, everyone thought she looked like a real Russian snow bunny.
I just died of your arms tonight.
She asked if he was sure it wasn't a hair accessory, but Balhath told her to put her war face on and channel willpower into it. When she did, it transformed into a whitewashed, samurai-looking helmet. Sarah tried to touch it, but was repelled by a force field. Balhath explained the enchanted helmet deployed a willpower force field. From what he'd seen, it was capable of stopping a fire dragon's claw. He called it the Silver Flower. After it switched back, Malchus started having a meltdown, claiming their technology was too advanced. If they launched an all-out invasion, the West would be annihilated. All hope was lost, and they were doomed. Sarah told her to calm down, but Balhath laughed and thought Western churchgoers were schizophrenics. Understanding their fear of unknown technology, Balhath told them to follow him to meet their master. It was considered holy ground for the dwarves. This was their secret ancient technology, the various Yugavud. Sarah immediately noticed the incredible amount of willpower it generated. In ancient times, after their ancestors parted ways with the sages, they wandered until they discovered this cave beneath the mountain. After digging around like typical dwarves, they uncovered the furnace and many other artifacts. Every dwarf yearned to learn about them before even learning to speak. It was the foundation of their technology, which was why they called it master. Kimaki thought it was the coolest thing she'd ever seen. Remembering her earlier conversation with the other tribal leaders, Sarah recalled they weren't interested in the war with the West. She asked if that eased their worries, but it didn't at all. However, Balhath believed if the conflict spread to their mountain, it'd be the perfect chance to test their heavy artillery. They couldn't ask for a better opportunity to gather data. If she returned home, she'd forget about mentioning the alcoholic dwarves. Meanwhile, the fire dragon waited outside for its prey. After Malchus overdosed, Kamaki asked Sarah if she wanted to stay and research with her. However, Sarah declined, saying she wasn't sure if she'd be staying. Kamaki sighed in disappointment, but Balhath noticed and pushed onward. After Malchus was put to sleep, Circe called her a crazy cult woman. Kamaki suddenly asked if it was true Sarah once had a crystal helmet. Sarah confirmed it, but explained it shattered during her fight with Vior. Kamaki asked what they'd used to create the crystal. However, Sarah admitted she was just a knight and knew nothing besides brute strength. Circe revealed the broken helmet was still at Veor's place, and if Kamaki visited, she could take a look. Suddenly, Balhath called for Kamaki. She apologized before heading to her grandfather. In the middle of the night, an alarm sounded, waking Sarah and the others. Kamaki walked in and wished them good morning. The alarm signaled that the furnace had started. Sarah looked outside and wondered how anyone could even tell it was morning. After breakfast, Sarah thought it'd be nice to visit the hot springs during winter, but Circe believed she just wanted to see the long-necked dragon again. Sarah asked why the changing rooms were separate if the baths were mixed. Kamaki explained that in dwarven culture, undressing was an invitation to crack. However, it was perfectly fine to see each other's buns if they undressed somewhere else. Suddenly, Kamaki announced she was moving to their village with Veor's permission. After she'd left the previous night, her grandfather realized she'd taken a liking to Sarah and Veor. Since Sarah now had dwarven gear, she needed someone to maintain it. Compared to dwarves, humans lived short lives. Veor and Sarah were both incredible warriors, and he believed she'd witness amazing things alongside them. He didn't want her to regret missing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity if she'd truly grown attached to them. Kamaki then leaned in and whispered she'd be there to watch Veor finally crack and cheer them on from the sidelines. Suddenly, several dwarves rushed in with news that the fire dragon from the day before was still waiting outside. Veor realized it had to be after them, since the dwarves had never dealt with this before. Malchus asked if there was another exit, but unfortunately, there wasn't. As a true dragon, the fire dragon could manipulate willpower. Veor believed that even if they tried to escape, it'd simply chase them down and surely kill them. Sarah welcomed the challenge, but Malchus thought she was insane. Sarah declared Serafina de Lavallon would never run, though Malchus suspected she just wanted to test her new helmet. Meanwhile, the dwarves scrambled to prepare for war. Kamaki thought times of crisis were the perfect opportunity to test their weapons. As Veor gave the order, Sarah's ears began twitching, leaving Malchus horrified by her thirst for battle. Sarah suited up and headed outside with her sword. She felt an immense amount of willpower before looking up at the sky. It suddenly dove down and blew Sarah away. When she got up, she was face to face, and it was sizing her up. It fired a fireball at her, but Veor neutralized it with his thunder voice. Veor told Sarah this was their chance to attack since it chose to fight on the ground. If it went airborne, it would have the advantage. It unleashed its flame breath next, but Sarah ran beside it and jumped up for a strike. However, its willpower was unlike anything else. It grabbed her and prepared a blast, but Veor came from the side and slashed its neck. He attacked again, but it did nothing. It locked onto him and fired, but he neutralized it again with his big glizzy aura. The light blinded it, and Veor kept attacking, but he was swatted away like a fly. They both charged in and attacked relentlessly, but neither could do any damage before getting swatted away again. The dwarves started shooting at it, but it fired a fireball at them instead. Watching their masters struggle, Circe asked if that thing was really on the same level as the Morrisuberi they hunted, but Malchus had no clue. Kamaki pulled out her chain destruction dragon bomb, causing everyone to crash out. The girls tried to stop her, thinking it would blow the others apart as well, but accidentally pulled the safety pins. Kamaki signaled to Veor and announced a bomb was coming. However, after it exploded, it had no effect, and the dragon looked directly at them. Kamaki wasn't surprised since it had no willpower behind it, but the others thought she was a whack job. Veor thanked them for giving him a second to catch his breath. He used his thunder voice, briefly stunning the fire dragon and giving Sarah the opportunity to charge in. However, it blocked at the last second, causing her to only take off a finger instead of its head. Afterwards, it flapped its wings and blew them away. It flew up and prepared to cook them with its willpower-enhanced flames, but Veor stepped in front. Just before it roasted them, Viufumek appeared and greeted the fire dragon as Red, leaving the dynamic duo speechless. Viufumek revealed Red had requested to speak to the two of them and summoned her. Red suddenly complimented Sarah's swordplay. It had been centuries since anyone had been able to cause harm to him. He claimed he had tested them as he wanted and would now return home. However, Sarah demanded an explanation for why he attacked them. Red thought that was fair, then landed before them. Red addressed them as the vessel of Orkfeim and Ilderin. Since his wounds ached, he planned to make it quick. quick. When Sarah apologized, he told her she should be proud because it proved her strength. If he truly wanted them dead, he would have stayed in the air and rained hellfire upon them until they were in hell itself. Sarah was terrified and realized she shouldn't have apologized. He explained he tested them for a simple reason. After a long absence, an Ildoran had finally returned to their territory. Because of that, it was custom for dragons to test each other. Sarah didn't understand what he meant. If she didn't understand, he had nothing else to tell her. He instructed her that to remember more, she would have to see more of these lands for herself. Before Red left, Veor mentioned his people had no idea true dragons could exchange wills. He explained they hunted a Morasubari down to death the other day and asked for his wisdom. Red explained it was simply the natural order of life. It had strength comparable to him. If something that mighty was slain by ones as small as them, it could only be because it was senile. When Sarah asked what he meant, he admitted he didn't even know what he meant. He also claimed he would have eaten them and everyone else if they failed their test. He reassured them they had no reason to feel guilty over the Morasubari. Before leaving, Red said if he felt like it, he might visit their village one day. However, they never invited him at all. Next time they met, he asked them to bring an offspring to show him. He flew away while crying about his broken finger. Viewfumek waved goodbye before vanishing herself. After they left, Veor thought how splendid it would be to crack and have a baby. But Sarah had no plans on becoming a single mother because of him. When the others came running, Malshez embraced Sarah, relieved she was safe. Suddenly, the army of struggling alcoholic dwarves ran out of the bushes, celebrating their victory. They asked how much willpower it took to sever the finger, then asked if they could keep it for themselves. In the afternoon, Balhath admitted to Kimaki that their people had lived on the mountain for many centuries. Even he, at 200 years old, never knew the fire dragon could speak. He truly believed that if she followed them, she'd see incredible things. He wished her good fortune in her studies before bumping helmets. After saying goodbye, Kimaki said she'd return with stories of her adventures and share them over sacred booze. Once the others waved her off, Veor activated his mock dragon and took off with the four of them behind him. In the air, Sarah gave Veor the answer she believed was right. She wanted to end her expedition, return home, and convince her people that exchange was more productive than conquest. After officially resigning from her post, she wanted to return east and get cracked as his new wifey. Veor thought that was splendid and was happy with her conclusion. Suddenly, Seraphina admitted she was surprised by how much she truly loved him, causing his oversized water gun to explode. Meanwhile, in Ildoran, the king ordered Margrave Sidious to continue the expedition at all costs, even if the men were exhausted. They were never meant for the salvation of their people, but to find his missing sister, Princess Westerizia. If you enjoyed this recap, subscribe for more anime stories and watch this video next.